Hey guys, what's up? It's Savannah. Welcome back to another episode of My Thoughts Exactly. Thank you guys so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I'm your host of My Thoughts Exactly. Before we get started, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here every single Friday on the podcast. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Fridays as well. So make sure you are subscribed. And with that being said, you guys, happy Friday. I hope you all have had a great week. And if you haven't, guess what? It's Friday. You did it. You made it. We're here. Happy Friday, you guys. I want to thank everyone. If you saw last week's episode, you already know what I'm about to say, but I want to thank everyone for the utmost support that I have gotten and just the sweet, kind messages that you guys sent over to me after I shared how I got my car stolen. Just seeing you guys in the comments, seeing how nice you were, kind you were off of a stupid mistake that I made. I really just appreciate you guys being there for me, which is why I thought that there was no better way to start off this episode than by giving you an update to what happened, which was I got my car back. Not yet, but it is no longer stolen. Let me explain. So I filmed that episode. Well, it came out on Friday, which was last Friday. So it came out a week ago. And a couple days before that, I filmed that episode on a Tuesday. My car got stolen on Monday. I filmed that on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, I got my car back. I actually was able, I think I explained in the previous episode how I needed to download a certain app that was going to be able to locate my car through the GPS system that the app provided, because I think that once you go into the app, it has a locator within the car. It's able to tell you where it is, whatever. I don't know the science behind it. But what I do know is on Wednesday, because I had to wait 48 hours for the email to go through to renew my subscription, which from Monday to Wednesday, 48 hours. And on Wednesday, I got the email. I immediately filled out everything that I needed to fill out. And then, lo and behold, it told me where my car was. I think I explained to you guys last week that it could possibly be an issue where someone would have to turn the car on in order for them to find it, in order for them to locate it. But luckily, regardless of anything, the app was able to locate my car just like that. So turns out, actually, the car was about 5 minutes away from my house. Whoever stole my car did not take it very far. And I had Hayden go over there and scope it out to see if it was my car. It was. I called the police. The police went over there. They did all their stuff that they needed to do. They then towed it to the impound lot because the key was not in there. And then from the impound lot, we towed it to the dealership because we are getting the key rewired because the key was not in there. So whoever has the key could have easily just come back and take it again. Could you guys imagine? Could you imagine if me and whoever's stealing my car play this game of I bring my car back and then they keep stealing it? That would have been funny. That would be a plot. But instead, we're making sure that that's not going to happen. So my car is currently in the process of having its key rewired. And we also changed the locks on the house. We had to go through, it was a whole thing. But lo and behold, the car is back in my possession, not currently here with me, but it is no longer missing, lost, stolen, all of the things. Hopefully, I don't know how long it takes to get a key rewired. I'm thinking maybe by next week I'll have it, hopefully. But I'm just very excited to have her back. I miss her so much. So hope you're doing well. Anyways, I'm excited to talk about today's episode. My car is not what we're here to talk about today, as you can tell by the title. Today we are talking, as you can see by the title, we are talking about an episode or just a topic that I feel like I have had on my mind a lot lately. I feel like it falls into kind of what I've been seeing a pattern of really for the entirety of this podcast being a thing and existing in general. I see this trend a lot. I see this pattern a lot pertaining to what would Sav do, and when you guys write in for Q&As about people drifting apart and not being as close with certain people in your life as you once were. I see, pertaining to friendships, relationships, even family members, having those feelings of wanting someone to maintain in your life or grieving someone who is no longer in your life, in that type of relationship that you once had, whether that be a breakup, a romantic breakup, friendship breakup, family breakup, whatever it is, and wanting that back and kind of coming to the realization and the rationalization that no longer is going to exist. That type of relationship that you thought thought was once going to be long lasting is no longer there. And how do you kind of wrap your head around that? And that falls into the category, in my opinion, of that people come around for reasons, for seasons, or for a lifetime. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And I feel like for myself in particular, something that I've really been, it's something that I've been thinking about a lot as of lately in the season that I am in my life of I'm engaged, I'm getting married. And I feel like whenever something monumental happens or you enter into a new era of life, oftentimes you reflect and you think about, okay, this is where my life is now, but what was my life like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 months ago? Like, you just have a tendency, I think, to reflect on the past and kind of see what the pieces were that were put together to land you where you currently are. So I want to talk about that today. I have some notes that I wrote down. I also have some statistics that I'm going to throw at you. If you're type A like me, you love a good statistic. I love statistics because to me, it makes things make sense. So I have some statistics for you, but I also just have some general thoughts about this whole topic. So we are going to jump right on into it today. Now, where I want to start is that I think that the first thing that we should recognize is I think that this is very common. It's something that a lot of people do. I think that it's very common for us to meet people, whether we put them into the friendship bucket, the relationship bucket, or if they're in the family bucket, we meet people and we want them to be in our lives forever. We want them to stick around. We want to, have them be long lasting for us. And it doesn't always end up working out that way. I think all of us could probably admit or agree to the fact that we have had people come into our lives. And when we've met them, we're like, yep, this is it. Wrap it up. Like, point blank, I'm done. Like, this is it. Whether that is a best friend that you felt a super strong, emotional connection with, or like a soul tie to, and you were like, this is my best friend. Like, this is my person. Or if it's in a relationship where you felt like everything was aligned and maybe you were super emotionally available and maybe the other person wasn't, but you were, and you're like, this is my person. They check off all of the boxes. And so you envision what life is going to be like. You almost can't picture a life that exists without them in it. Or maybe it's a family member who, again, shapes you in ways that you just weren't impacted before. And I think that when those things happen and when we start to have those feelings of feeling like this person is going to be in my life forever, this is a long lasting thing. Like, I can't imagine what life is going to be like without them. A lot of times, more often than not, which I think is kind of the scary thing to recognize in this, but I do think that more often than not, somewhere down the line in life, whether that be a month later, 3 months later, a year later, 5 years later, whatever, something shifts because people change and circumstances change. And suddenly this person that you never would have pictured your life without is no longer in it for whatever reason, whether there was an argument, a fight, you just naturally drifted away, regardless of what that cause was, what the catalyst of that was that caused this drift. It's going to hurt because we as humans and just as people, well, I was going to say as humans and people in general, but that's the same thing. We as people, we want to hold on. It is natural for us to want to hold on to the people that are in our lives and the people around it. We want to be in control of our narrative and of our story and who comes in and out of our lives. And we want to believe that just because we like someone enough and we love someone enough, that that's enough for them to stay forever. And I think that a lot of times, we think when we meet people and we're getting the best version of them, right? We are getting the top tier, top shelf version. The best version of someone always comes forward, or typically that's why you hear about like the honeymoon stages and, the beginning of a relationship. It's always the best is what people say, because that's when people put their best foot forward. We're getting the best version of someone. So when we see the best version of someone, when we see all of their amazing qualities and what they're putting forward, we're looking at it with rose-colored glasses and we're like, oh my God, yes, like this is what I've been missing. This is what I've been looking for. Friendship or relationship. You're like, this is it. If you're anything like me, oftentimes when I would meet people in my past, whether that be friendships or dating, I would be like, oh my God, you're amazing. Missing piece found. Like, that was it. Wrap it up. But I think that over time, when you start to see the depths of someone and who they truly are, and oftentimes that's not what you initially envisioned, or they, fuck you over, or they end up going and, doing something, talking behind your back, whatever it is, betraying you in some way. I think that we get very hurt, obviously, because that's a hurtful thing. And we get backstabbed and we get betrayed, and it causes a rift or a shift. Or if it's not like that, and again, if it's something that just naturally happens, we can't foresee that into the future. One, because we're not psychic and we're not God, and we can't see what's going to come next. But two, I think that in the moment when those, the best foot forward is being placed, it's like, oh my God, this is it. I can't imagine my life without this person, because it feels like you're so connected, you're so intertwined, you guys are leveled with each other, you're on the same page about everything, and you feel like you can't imagine a world. I keep going back to this, but this is truthfully what it feels like. I remember so many times in my life, I was like, I just can't imagine a world where this person wasn't in my life. Or like, I can't imagine a world where, this person and I wouldn't talk all the time, or I wouldn't see them all the time, or we wouldn't be best friends. But as time goes on and as life plays out, you get to notice that no, you actually, maybe you can't see it now, but you will see it later. Maybe it's against your will or not, but you will see it later. And I think that that's why, hence the title of this episode, people come into your lives for different reasons, different seasons, different reasons, or a lifetime. And oftentimes that person can fall into the category of a lesson. When I say reason, I also mean lesson. I think reason and lesson go hand in hand here, because I know personally, and I've expressed this to you guys before on this podcast, there has been so many times in my life where I have tried to fit a circle into a square, and I've tried to force something and force people to stay in my life for the long haul, no matter what they did, and for really no other reason other than the fact that I was fighting for a long-lasting connection, even if that connection had already died out at that point, because the idea of them not being in my life was scarier than them being in my life and treating me poorly. I would rather have them in my life and treat me poorly because it was predictable and because I knew what was coming and I could brace myself for that. And in a weird way, the toxicity and the unsettledness came with a sense of stability rather than not having them in my life at all. Because if I didn't have them in my life at all, I didn't know what that was going to mean. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. That was a change that I could not predict. And that to me was scarier. And here's where I'm going to hit you with some statistics. There are studies that show and studies that suggest that every person we meet serves a purpose in our personal development. According to research, 70% of people we form connections with in our lives will only be temporary. Think about that. We meet so many people. We form connections with so many people, relationships, friendships, acquaintances, but only 70%, not only, but 70% of those in totality are only going to be temporary. And I think that that's such a crazy thing to think about when you think about the phases of life. I know personally for me, when I think about the phase of life of me moving to Nashville and what that phase has looked like, I think about the phase prior to that, in between like COVID and probably, when did I move here? 2021? Yeah, like that timeline. No, because that was a year. Maybe like, 2020 to 2022. Maybe that's like an era that I had. I think about, 3 years before that, I categorize my life in these different eras. And so when I go back to a specific era, a specific chapter of life, and I see the type of person I was, who I was hanging around, who I was surrounding myself with, it's almost nearly impossible for me at that time to have thought that those people in that current moment would not be the people that I'm standing with today. Obviously, you don't think about that in the moment when you're surrounding yourself with friends and relationships, and you have people that you think are going to be long lasting, because no one goes into a relationship or a friendship thinking that this is going to end in one way or another, whether it crashes and burns or whether you naturally drift apart. No one is going into it with that mindset, but it's crazy to think how sure I was at the time of like, oh, these people are going to be here forever. And like, why wouldn't they stay in my life? And why wouldn't I have the same level and depth of the relationship and friendship that I have with them now in 5 years? And here I am 5 years later, and I have a completely different life. And I think that that's so interesting when we learn that 70% of the people that we form connections with, whatever that connection is, are going to be temporary. That temporary falls into the category of either passing acquaintances, seasonal friendships, or short-term relationships that serve the purpose of being stepping stones to our own personal growth. There was another study from the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships that found that people often overestimate the performance of their relationship, believing certain connections will last forever, only for life circumstances to shift them apart. Obviously, life circumstances come into play, or whether it's things naturally fizzle out, or whether there's some big explosive, argument or blow up that happens. People, again, overestimate the amount of time that someone is going to be in your life because you don't picture it otherwise, right? You don't go into a relationship being like, yeah, in like 3 months, we're probably not going to talk. Maybe you do. I know some people do. I know some of my friends that do that. And they're like, I don't know. I don't see this being someone that's like, I have one friend in particular. I love her to death. And she's one friend who she never had anxiety, like ever. When I was at my peak of anxiety with like all my dating and, situationships and all of that, I would go to her and I would be like, I have so much anxiety. And she was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like she didn't feel that. And it was crazy to me. And I remember having so many conversations with her where she was very level-headed and logical and being like, I like this person. I can see myself being friends with them. I could see myself dating them for a fun hot minute, but it's not going to be something that's like long-term, or like in a year from now, we're probably not going to talk. And like for her, that didn't affect and like bother her to where me, someone who does have anxiety and someone who does like get really in my head about, a fear of change and wanting things to maintain the way that they are, I would freak out over the fact that, someone could possibly not be in my life for a year because I couldn't fathom what that would look like. And the unknown of that would scare me, if that makes sense. So little shout out to her. She knows who she is. I love her. But there was also a conversation, a study that I saw. And this was from a doctor named Dr. Henry Cloud. And he stated that relationships can be divided into 3 different categories. Those 3 categories are people who come into our lives for a reason. Those are the ones who teach us something, whether that be good or bad. They leave us with a lasting impact that we will carry through the trajectory of our lives. So that is kind of the first bucket. The second is people who come in through different seasons of our lives. So this is the season bucket. The people who come in through certain phases of life and naturally drift when that phase ends, when that season of life or their purpose has been fulfilled, whatever that is, on both sides, by the way, that naturally just ends. It reaches its course and it naturally drifts. And then you have the third bucket, which is the people that are meant to stay. And these are the ones that are few and far between. We as people, 70% of the people, as I just said, are going to come and go. It's the 30%, the few and far between that stay. And the ones that do, those are the ones that I feel like we should be so grateful for. And those are the ones that when we feel that we are truly aligned with our values and our growth and our journey. And these are the ones that are in it for the long haul, not just for us, but us for them as well. And I know that for a lot of people, me included, we want to be able to pick and choose who gets to be in that long haul bucket. We want to pick and choose who's going to stay for the long haul, but we don't get to do that. We don't get to pick and choose who's going to be in that bucket. And the fact of the matter is a lot of times what we have to remember is people need to, that bucket, the long haul bucket, that is reserved for the utmost special and important people in your life. That is reserved for the people that are going to be there for you through thick and thin, through whoever. Be very particular about who you place into that bucket. Be very picky as to who you give that privilege of being in that bucket to, because I know for me, I would throw around that golden ticket like it was nobody's business. And I would be like, I like you. I want you to stay. You are going into the long haul bucket, and you're okay. I kind of like you. We'll see where it goes. You go into the season bucket. And the thing is we can't pick and choose like that. We can hope and we can be optimistic that this can, be something that's long lasting, and this can, be something that's in it for the long haul. But at the end of the day, we can't, sadly, I say sadly, and I mean that because I wish that it wasn't the case, but we can't always pick and choose who gets to stay in our lives and who doesn't. And when I say this, I think I need to clarify this, and I probably should have in the beginning. I'm not talking about this from the sense of, someone being on earth or not. I feel like I need to clarify that. I'm not talking about this from the standpoint of people who pass away or, grief from a tragic loss. I'm more so speaking about this from a general point of, people that come in and out of our lives. And I think that this is important to talk about, especially if you're someone who gets really anxious about the idea of change and gets anxious about are people going to stay? Are they not? What's going to happen? How is this relationship going to unfold over time? The fact of the matter is we cannot predict how things are going to unfold, obviously, clearly. But what we can do is we can be super present, and we can be super present and grateful for the people that are with us through the chapter of life that we are in now. We can be particular and picky about who we want to put in that long haul bucket and who we are giving the access to that version of yourself to. Be particular, be picky, be specific. It is worth it in the end, I promise you. But also be present and be vulnerable and be emotionally available for the people in your life in this chapter, even if that means that they're only there for a season or a reason. If that's the case, that's not a bad thing. I think I need to clarify that too. If someone comes into our life for a reason or a lesson, let's say, oftentimes it can be toxic, but sometimes it doesn't have to be, and that's okay. It's okay for a lesson to be learned and for you to still have a sense of respect, for you to still be like, that's a good person. I admire them for this, that, and the third. Or it's also okay that sometimes it's toxic, and we're going to get into that in a second as well. But I want to emphasize that because I think it's important to state that just because someone's not in the long haul bucket doesn't mean that they're, bad or toxic or whatever the status and, form of the relationship that you had with them was unhealthy. I don't mean it like that. So, Dr. Henry Cloud, like I said, let's just wrap that point up. He put them into 3 buckets: season, reason, long haul. Those are the buckets. And another harsh truth that we all have to face in this life is that, especially when pertaining to relationships, I think, and friendships too. I think that this falls into the friendship category as well, because I feel like I oftentimes have, put friends on pedestals when maybe they have not done the same for me. Not that I need to be put on a pedestal, but what I mean by that is I have taken the friendship more seriously than they have. I have put more gravity and more weight on the friendship than they do. And the harsh truth and the big sister truth is that sometimes you are going to put someone in a different category than they will put you. I know that there are many people in my life who would probably just see me as a season. Okay. And there's nothing I can do about that. For me, they were a reason. For me, they were a lesson. For them, I was probably just a season. I'm sure that there's vice versa to that as well that I don't know about. I'm sure that there's people that I was a lesson for, that to me, it was more so just in passing and a season of life and a chapter that closed, and that's okay too. But we cannot pick and choose what bucket we are going into someone else's life, whether that's the reason, the season, or the long haul bucket. Obviously, a lot of times we naturally want to put ourselves in the long haul bucket, because why wouldn't we? We don't want to be someone else's season. We don't want to be in the seasonal bucket. We want to be in the long haul bucket, but we can't pick and choose on that either. And one of the hardest parts of this is when we hold on to people that we want in the long haul bucket that don't deserve a spot there. We want someone to stay there because, we see it with them. We see the long haul with them. And a lot of times they aren't necessarily good for us. Sometimes it's not about the love that we have for them that even wants us to keep them in that bucket. It's not about oh my God, I love them so much. They're so great for me. Our relationship is so healthy. Our friendship is so healthy. Because if that were the case, this would be a different conversation. But more so, it's about the fear of change, like I said. And this is another little fun fact for you. Psychology tells us that humans are creatures of habit. We crave stability, even when it means keeping toxic or unfulfilling relationships in our lives, simply because they are familiar. It all goes back. We've talked about this so many times on this podcast. Remember when I mentioned to you guys about the first impression bias? This is when just to give you a little recap, when you first meet someone, and like I said, they present their best foot forward, that is what we hold on to. Through all the ups and the downs, through all the toxicity, we go back to that first impression because we're like, no, we remember that. You were that. And I really liked that. So like, you're going through it right now. These are bad days right now, but you're still that person that I really liked in the very beginning, what you first showed me. Along with that, it also comes with this sense of familiarity. We know the good and the bad of the person standing in front of us, even if we want them in the long haul bucket, even if we want them in the long lasting bucket. We know the good and the bad that comes with that, and we're willing to accept that, not because we should, because we shouldn't, but we're willing to accept it because knowing the bad and good of someone else and knowing the toxicity of someone else is less scary than knowing the unknown of someone who could possibly be better for you and someone who could treat you the way you actually deserve. We crave familiarity. We crave a pattern. We crave consistency. Even if it's completely unstable in the sense of it's toxic, it's on and off. When it's really toxic like that, you can predict that. I know the toxic relationships that I've been in. I could have predicted how it was going to go, and that's exactly how it went. But I was more comfortable. I didn't reach my breaking point yet, and then I did, and then I was done. But in the beginning, when you're going through the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows, that was predictable. To me, the toxicity was predictable. It was being treated as I deserved to be and being treated like I had a value that actually was almost worrisome to me because I wasn't willing to accept that fact yet. I wasn't willing to accept that I was worthy of feeling treated well. I wasn't ready to accept that I was undeserving to the treatment that I was getting. And I finally did get there, and it's something that I'm still working on. And I do want to make a whole episode about that at some point and talking about feeling ready to accept the behavior that you actually do deserve and that you are worthy of. But again, when you're not in that phase and when you're not in that space yet, it's easier to accept the toxicity. It's easier to accept the roller coaster because we as humans fall back on familiarity and we don't like change. And so seeing something that's up and down, seeing something that's toxic, it's like, oh no, we can predict that. We know how that's going to end, but we're just going to ride that one out and we're going to stay in it. It's easier for us than making the decision of putting a halt on that and closing that chapter of life and going into something that is unfamiliar and unknown. Because the fact of the matter is, life is, as we know, very unpredictable. And no matter how hard we try to hold on to the plans that we make or the visions that we have for certain people in our lives pertaining to friendships or romantic partners and relationships, sometimes things just don't go as we expect them to. Sometimes people break up. Sometimes you get betrayed. Sometimes things just don't go our way. And as much as it sucks, it really is okay. I promise you, it will be okay because there is so much growth in that. And that is where it happens. The growth happens in the outgrowing whether that's relationships or expectations or even versions of our old selves, versions of our old selves that no longer exist or no longer match up and align with the visions that we have for ourselves in the future and where we're headed. And it's never easy to let go. Obviously, take it from me. How many times, I would love to have a counter of how many times I've told you guys, I don't like change. I don't like letting go. I don't like not being in control. But the fact of the matter is, and something that I've had to learn along the way in my 28 years of life, is that it's not easy to let go. It's not fun to let go, but sometimes it is necessary in order to choose yourself. And choosing yourself is never a bad thing. You never lose when you choose yourself. When you walk away from toxicity and make peace with change, which is uncomfortable and scary because if you don't like change, then obviously you're not going to want to make peace with it. But when you accept it and when you just allow it, the exhale that comes from that and comes with that is really something because you're now allowing your life to unfold in ways that you never could have thought possible. The horizon's open. When you accept that, when you welcome it, you are really broadening the horizons of what your life can be. And it can be scary because change is, but you're opening the door for something better to be there. So if you're feeling right now, this, all things to say, if right now you are feeling like things are not going the way that you have planned or that you envisioned for yourself, and you're just feeling like things are not going the way that this is not what I thought, and I'm going to have to hold on even tighter. I'm going to have to tighten my grip so that I can have the most control. And you stress yourself out over that. You will go crazy trying to do that. You will spiral out of your mind when you try to control things that you cannot. And so when you're sitting there and you're like, things aren't going the way that I planned, and now I'm going to like even spiral even more, I encourage you to pause for a second and just take a moment and take a breath and recognize and almost come to terms with the fact that even though things aren't going to your plan, does not mean that they're not happening the way that they're supposed to. Sometimes your plan isn't always right. Sometimes your plan isn't what was supposed to happen. And it enters into a bigger conversation of whatever it is that you want to believe in. But sometimes you have to come to peace and come to terms with the fact that maybe your plan wasn't the plan, and that's okay. But we can't imagine that because we're us and you are the only you, and you're obviously only thinking about your plan. But maybe sometimes it's bigger than that, and you as a person are going to evolve, and you're allowed to change course, and life is allowed to change. It's just a natural part of it. And what's important is, again, to prioritize your own well-being and to choose you, because you never lose when you choose yourself. And I think that it's not easy to remember that. It's not easy to remember that that is okay, that we need to choose ourselves sometimes. And even though this isn't what we envision for ourselves in this moment, we are going to look back in 5 years and be like, oh my God, I cannot believe that I thought that at that time. I can't imagine my life not being where it is right now. The people that are going to come into your life, the experiences that you're going to have from this change of course is really going to shape you. And a lot of times, and I think it was either my mom or my aunt said this to me one time, and it really, really stuck, and I wrote it down. And it's, the life that we're meant for isn't the one we planned. It's the ones that we allowed ourselves to step into, or it's the one, not ones. We get one, and it's the one that we allow ourselves to step into. When you drop the sword, and when you stop trying to control everything, and when you stop trying to be the puppet master for everyone else in your life, you are opening the door to spontaneity. You are opening the door to surprise. You are opening the door to what could potentially be the best years of your life, or the best experiences that you'll have, the best people you'll meet. And you would never been able to have that if you have such a tight grip and worry on controlling sometimes the toxicity that's around you. So I leave you with that. Those are my thoughts. Hence, my thoughts exactly. With that being said, you guys, that's all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this little rant. I enjoyed it. I think I made sense. I know in my mind I made sense. I don't know about your mind, but in my mind, it kind of made sense. But that's what I will leave you with. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll be back next week with a brand new one. Thanks so much for tuning in, you guys. Like I mentioned in the beginning, make sure you go ahead and hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. That way you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with a brand new one, and I'll see you then. Bye, guys.